Who's squeaking? I think I have my squeaker with me. Nope. So this morning's Dharma talk is titled Pride. Hideouts? Hides out? Hideout? Hides out. Hideout. You wrote it down. What does it say?
Do you want what I wrote or what you sent me?
Doesn't matter.
Pride hideouts.
Fine. So the idea there with that topic is to talk about the way that particular aspect of the ego mind, the self-centered mind, the me first mind. Perhaps this talk will help you look at that more closely, or see. You may think you have no pride, which is pretty prideful. Excuse me. So as in the Yogacara tradition, the 8 consciousnesses, which is what we use to try to see how consciousness works. It's very simple. The first 5 sense fields, very simple: smell, taste, touch, hearing, seeing, and so on. The 6th consciousness is the one that kind of keeps track of all that and makes sure that the person who is, or the consciousness that is smelling is also the same consciousness that is seeing the fire that they're smelling. Instead of that way, we don't, because the consciousness doesn't belong to anybody, then it tends to gather around a particular entity who's come into this lifetime for whatever purpose. Maybe to fulfill their karma, maybe to actually get what they missed in the last time, or to double back around and go through that whole same thing again. As I say over and over again, don't believe a word I say, but don't disbelieve it and don't look away from it. But reflect on it a little bit. Give it the benefit of the doubt a little bit. When you start to believe something, this is what happens to the awareness. Start to shut down. So you don't have to do that. You don't need that reference point. You can live life just perfectly well with no opinions whatsoever. This doesn't mean that opinions won't come and go like they should. They serve a purpose. We need to come to conclusions about, as things are changing and appearing and going, you're going to come to conclusions about everything, and then it goes away. So, and it should. But if there's some kind of fear happening, the two that they tend to go unnoticed are hope and fear. Fear doesn't go unnoticed, but we don't really look and see that hope is part of that. You can't have fear without hope, and what the other one is, vice versa. So I better take care of this before I sniff for the rest of the hour. Pardon me. So then there's the 6th, the thinking process. That's just a generic thinking process, which also has a quality of self-centeredness also that kind of leaks over from the 7th. Just a way of talking about it. Somebody, Bill Waldron, could come here and say, no, it's not exactly that way. It's this. So, and I would not argue with him at all. There's nothing to prove. It's just the way it looks here. And the 7th consciousness, which is where the so-called pride is located, that little dab of me first, along with the other 3 aspects, which is probably dozens of different aspects to the 7th consciousness, or the paranoia about protecting something, or the fear that something's going to be taken over, and so on. Not too much intelligence happening there from the point of view of an open perception of what's happening or what this is about. And then, as we have heard about before, the Alaya Vijnana, or the storehouse consciousness, which creates the whole dynamic of consciousness from the storage area to the actual just smelling something. That's all brought together in such a way that it feels like there's someone here. There's a body. The 5 skandhas, we would go to that if we wanted to go through that process and see how that hooks up or links up, or how those are dependently arisen. So the pride area is interesting because it's not just a flashy pride that shows up as some kind of puffing up, but it's also very subtle. If someone has seen that in themselves and doesn't want that, is self-conscious and is trying to, instead of just seeing what that is and letting it be what it is, instead there's a tendency to want to push it down so nobody knows that you have that. So I often say, you don't have to correct anything. There's nothing to correct. Whatever's happening in your mind should just be received. Don't try to be somebody else. Be who you are. And that may be, if you start to step onto that path, that may be terrifying. But if you find out that there isn't anyone, then there's nobody terrified. There's just the terror. Or on a lower level, maybe you're not that fancy an incarnation where you're going to be terrified. Maybe you'll just be scared. What did they used to call that? Scaredy cats. Yeah. I don't know why they pick on cats. Well, I guess I do know. So the interesting way this happens, and there's lots of ways, we can talk about it. If you have questions about it, I'll try to, mutually, we'll try to talk about that. So one of the things that happens that is not an obvious kind of pride is the pride that just flips over and where we start to get down on yourself. I'm terrible. I can't do this. And that's just pride. It's the same energy gone under. So it doesn't look like it. And it doesn't even look like it to you. You don't think you're full of pride. You're just kind of disgusted with yourself. Just down on yourself. You don't want to be that way. You want to be someone else. You want to be somebody better, somebody who doesn't have that kind of extreme narcissism. Second noble truth, wanting things to be different than they are. It all comes back to that basic thing that the Buddha saw deeply, profoundly, and without limit. So it's always about awareness. It's nothing to correct. It's about seeing deeply into these structures of the self-centeredness so that they don't control us and manipulate us, and so that we see them and then we include them because they're also dependently arisen. But they're not dependently arisen as a solid, believable, secure, stable identity. They're dependently arisen because they're not separate from anything else, but they happen to appear individually. How am I doing? When we were in the Hojo, he came in to get the computer and he said, "You're going to do just great out there." So when we open Karma House over there, we're going to have a grand opening, and it's going to be open mic night, and you're going to be the first stand-up comic. I'll teach you. Well, I have a teacher, so I guess I can teach you. Only if you want to. You'll do great. So the seventh consciousness, again, this could be if we were actually had some kind of a supreme being who would look down and say, that's seventh consciousness. That doesn't work too well. It's actually a 7.5 mixed with a 6.5, and then there's a 12th consciousness nobody's looking at. You could go on. I'm sure there are scholars out there that are probably doing this kind of thing and writing books about it and getting published and so on. I have no problem with that because people can do whatever they want to do. What I'm recommending, if you're listening to me, what I'm recommending that you do is use the structure the way it is and see if it'll break down for you in a way that helps you or supports you in seeing more deeply into your narcissism, into your self-centeredness. Again, it's not about getting rid of it. That's another, people trying to do that. Stop this. Don't, be more peaceful. Don't be warlike. It's a misunderstanding. And the pride situation also can come up in the seventh consciousness using that model. Also can come up as and it's very subtle in this area, but as a um, looking down on someone. Actually feeling sorry for someone, and it masquerades as compassion. It is not compassion. If you're actually compassionate, you won't necessarily have emotions. Because your clarity is completely profound and vast. That's compassion. Everything else is somewhere else. They're trying to feel, still using very subtle strategy, work with the dependent origination in such a way that we buy this and we don't buy that, continually separating things out. If somebody is in front of you and you're talking to them and they're telling you about their difficulty, you need to be able to listen to them and receive what's happening. Don't produce anything unless they say, what should I do about that? And then if you've really been receiving, you'll be able to spontaneously say to them something that may be helpful. But if you have a bunch of ideas or opinions about other people and what's happening in their life, you should zip it. Mind your own business. And so that very situation in seventh consciousness, again, using that model, and I was thinking before when I was talking to Unio about it, I'm not sure I have a sense of this, but I'm not sure I can get this into words in a way that fundamentally is possible for you to receive what I'm saying or what I'm trying to point at. But it's a very subtle area, and it's pride, and it's a very subtle area, and it's about using the feeling that is arising as a response to what somebody else is going through, and using that to fuel the identity. Just to leave that area for a moment and go into the sixth consciousness. The sixth consciousness, you could say, and I wasn't taught this particularly, but it's the way it's showing up for me. It's like we have indigenous people in the country, the people that were here first, if there is such a thing as being anywhere first, indigenous people. And the sixth consciousness is like an indigenous consciousness. It's a native consciousness. It's just the very necessary thing for. That's what's happening in a deer or in a mouse or in an eagle. There's some kind of basic mental quality that is happening that is orchestrating what is being received by all of the other consciousnesses, the sense of smell, taste, touch, thinking, or not thinking, but taste, smell, there. Sometimes ask somebody, say, name your six sense fields. People have to really think about it because they're so ignoring what that is. You have to see, well, let's see, I smell. And, then there's taste. Very difficult to just rattle those off. So the idea with the indigenous area is that there's some self-centeredness. They're kind of it's busy keeping everything running or organized or orchestrated. So there's not a lot there, but there's some happening there. It's kind of and sometimes when things start to collapse in the seventh, then there's a kind of a bouncing out of that back but down into the sixth and back up. Well, sure, I'm here. Same thing we do. The seventh consciousness does that with the eighth. It says, well, yeah, well, sure. It points to the eighth and says, well, yeah, there's a self. There it is. I'm not it. I'm just a gatekeeper here. What I like, what I don't like. The pride part of it is something that each person will have to see on their own by themselves, on the cushion, after the cushion, post-meditation, however you want to say it. It's very, very subtle. And please, if you begin to see it, do nothing with it. don't change. If change happens, then don't stop the change. But look at it, because if you come to a conclusion about it, even that it's pride, and the tendency of the self-centered mind, which is multiple, will want to get away from that because it doesn't want to be prideful. More ego. It's very, very subtle, and it keeps turning on itself like that. This is why it seems to be necessary to not only have an awareness practice where you're stretching that which receives everything, the awareness, the accommodator of everything. You also need a sangha. You also need a teacher, and of course, the teaching. You need a sangha so you can meet face-to-face people who are on the same path that you are and are working with it differently. Some people are just so apparently full of themselves that they're difficult to be around. And other people don't seem to be so full of themselves and they're real easy to be around. But it's very possible the one who's easy to be around is the one that really has the difficulty in that area. And the person who's running off at the mouth or whatever is actually working with it in a more intimate way. Don't set up standards. Don't judge by any standards at all. As soon as you start judge by any standards or any comparison whatsoever, everything stops investigating. Always be open. Always know that when someone says, you're going to do fine, that they actually mean it. And they actually know how frightened you are. Not kidding you. Questions are fine if you have them.
I've been going through a time of grief, pretty much my childhood, grieving a lot of the pain from my childhood.
Yes. What's your name, please?
My name is Kate.
Hi, Kate.
And I was raised Roman Catholic. My first time in a Buddhist temple. And I realized that a lot of things I thought were fear were really my pride. It's interesting you brought it up today. But my question is that sometimes when I'm really sad and it's to me maybe self-centered, it's really grief, and like, what's a fine line between grief and pride? I thought it could be interesting.
Very similar.
To hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't have many thoughts, but I can answer your question, or at least respond to it. I don't know if it'll answer it. But they're both separated and they're not separated. Giving something a name actually gives it a credential. That's why people are, if you come to me, not every teacher will do this, and you formally become a Buddhist, a student of the Buddha's Dharma, not just this old man, a student of the Buddha's Dharma, then I will change your name. And then you need to use that name. Well, there's some pride there too, but it doesn't last too long just because of the nature of the practice you have to do. How much do you meditate?
I mean, I don't quantify it. My life is a meditation, I think. I
Horse
live my
shit.
life with attention.
Horse shit. Or some other kind of shit.
Huh?
Or some other kind of shit.
Okay.
I'm telling you, you're sitting in here. You give me permission to talk to you. If you didn't come in here, I couldn't say that. If I met you somewhere else, I would never think of saying that to you.
I receive you.
Okay, good. Good. So, but don't, I'm not saying your life isn't a meditation when I say horse shit. I'm just trying to bring your awareness to what you're saying there. You're actually closing down by naming what your life is.
Okay. I receive you.
Good. Probably is a meditation. Did I answer your question?
I asked her thoughts. It wasn't really a question.
Yeah.
I did receive your thoughts.
Okay. Good luck. Further questions?
What happens to the ego when pride falls away?
Nothing. You just instead of looking at some kind of solid idea of ego, you're just looking at the bare bones. There's still sinew. There might be even odds and ends happening there, but it doesn't have any. It has no. To use the fancy word, it has no ontological status as someone who's solid that you've got to get rid of or you've got to hide out from. More?
I can't imagine ego without pride. So I'm just feels like it's infused. Pride is infused in my ego.
So what's the problem?
I don't know what to do with it,
Don't do anything with it.
but it keeps showing up.
So
I keep making an ass of myself.
well, I'm happy that you know that. You don't have to have other people tell you that. Doesn't your wife tell you that quite often?
She doesn't. She lets me know in soft, loving ways.
Yeah, kind of like I do.
No.
Just like the compassionate way I related to Kate's question.
Do you know who Kali Ma is?
Who?
Kali Ma from Hinduism?
Was it a woman?
Yes.
The hugging woman? She's the one that hugs everyone? Oh, who is it?
She's the goddess of destruction who has the skulls around
Oh,
her.
Kali. Yes, I know who that is. Yes.
She's the one that teaches true compassion
Oh, good.
that you are describing.
Oh, thank you. Did I do okay? Scary sometimes. Further questions?
Shane from California has a question.
Oh, no. Shane. Okay, Shane, go ahead.
How do we work with the co-occurrence of pride and things we should actually do differently to further our progress on the path?
Sit more. Sit down, hold still. Look at the ambition that comes out of your question. Look at the ambition. Don't get rid of it. Don't join it. Don't approve of it. Don't disapprove. Don't look away. Those are the three poisons. So look at the wall. Gaze at the wall. Do block sitting. Sit in 4-hour segments once a week or twice a week. There's nothing to get rid of.
Earlier, you bringing up something that you said that you were talking to Unia about having difficulty putting into words. But you said pride is using a response to somebody else's situation, and that fuels the identity.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Could you say more about that?
Ask me a question other than that. Ask me Kate's question. Can you remember her question? Weren't you paying attention? Were you all wrapped up in your own thoughts?
Is grief pride?
Let's ask her. She's the one that said that.
I do not believe that grief is pride.
Okay.
I do not.
Okay.
I think there are elements that could be slipping into pride,
Okay.
but for the most part, no.
You have any questions for her?
No, I'm very curious about that subtle area that you were talking
Yeah.
about earlier too.
Yeah.
I was gonna try to ask something along those lines unless Shoto has.
Shoto, go ahead.
Shoshi, can you ask my question?
Yes.
Is sympathy pride? Is that what you're pointing at?
You know, I'm not saying that any one of them is pride. I'm saying that that's pride will use that as a mask. And the consciousness, the awareness, your wisdom mind kind of sees that, but it kind of gives it all a break. Your wisdom mind is not somebody. It's wisdom, and it doesn't belong to anybody. Wisdom there isn't anywhere. Everywhere you look, there's wisdom. Everywhere you look, there's the Buddha. Unless you're confused or ignorant, and then you'll see otherness. You'll see everything is other, everything is else, everything is an enemy, and everything is a friend, everything is success or failure, all the other. But if you see what this is, then everything is empty of other. It's empty of the otherness that it looks like it wasn't empty of.
Is pride thinking there's someone else?
Yeah, good one. Yeah, it is. So it's very interesting to know that all you have to do is see this. It's always about awareness. Buddha, the awakened one. What did he awaken to? Suffering. And what did he awaken to? Confusion, delusion, He did not awaken to happiness or peace or tranquility that most people are striving to get to, because he saw the dependent origination of this world. And as Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce, which I quote often because I think it's such a great quote, from Where the Sun Stands Now, I will fight no more forever. Just no more fighting with yourself, no more disagreement. Be the negativity that's arising. Whatever negativity is arising, just don't argue with it. Not easy. Right, Rumi? Yes.
We don't have to get rid of pride or the ego, and it seems to make us think there's somebody else. How can we see not separate if there is a pride and ego?
I think it's just by persistence, giving the benefit of the doubt of whatever's arising without doing anything with it. Comes back to the three natures of everything is dependently arisen. If you don't see that, then you're going to think other things. Those things will be dependently arisen. They're all obvious. And then we judge, we add on, I like it, I don't like it, it's good, it's bad, it shouldn't be that way, it should be this way. And we just make a big pile of otherness. Go ahead. Yes.
Is pride at the base of any other kind of separate emotion we might think we have?
Paraphrase that.
Is pride the basic separation?
I don't know if you could call it basic, although it might be stronger, say, in some people than in others. Pride is it's we have an idea of what that is, that puffed up kind of feeling, but actually it might be the other side of it. Anytime you have one thing, you're always going to have the opposite polarity. They're not separate from each other. So it's like if a person sets themselves up as someone who just wants peace and just wants love and kindness and all of this in the world, and goes out and tries to push that on another aspect of the world that is more at war and wants their rights and wants their territory and wants this and wants this. That whole polarity is just war. I often say, don't go to war, and don't go to peace. Don't do anything. Peace is already the case. If you fiddle with anything, everything starts to, it tends to be a big contest going on all the time. Jason.
Just listening to your talk upstairs, some questions came up around the bodhisattva vows.
I was upstairs talking.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Yeah, you were much flatter though.
I've lost some weight.
I was just wondering, when we talk about the bodhisattva vow to be with all things, we kind of idealize it and talk about that fruition.
Yes.
And when we're still in the midst of our own suffering and people we like and dislike, what is the path of the bodhisattva?
That's how it feels. There will always be people you like and dislike, and because it's dependently arisen. So we're here, we're human beings. Be genuine. Be genuine. Be your neurosis. If you actually are your neurosis, then it can't attack you from the side. You know who you are. It's called, there's a fancy word for that. What's it called? Humility. Being humble. Knowing that you're crazy, you have some difficulty, you have some jealousy, you have some envy, and shit like that's going on below the surface, and it's there. Please don't try to get rid of that. You came into this world, it'd be like trying to meditate away your ears because you don't like your ears, or anything else that we try to do with our body. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying do whatever you want to do. But to respond to your question, just be with all things, whether that's something showing up in your mind stream or your sensorium, however you want to express that, or whether it's apparently something showing up outside as another person, another thing. No more warfare with anything. Just if you can see that outside, inside are not two different things, they're just two words for the same thing. Hope and fear, two words for the same thing. Life and death, two words for the same thing. Nothing happens. Go ahead.
Does be with all things take on a different quality when it is within the context of the Sangha?
Same word.
You've often said that the Sangha is not people we'd particularly choose to be friends with. So outside of the Sangha, you can choose to not be around somebody.
Yes,
You
you
say,
can.
wow, that's difficult. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Does that take on a different quality within the context of?
Well, that's why we receive vows. If you need to, everyone's different. That's why we do that, so that we can have some kind of I've said I'm going to do this. But as you go, you realize what that vow means. That means that you're going to actually have to be with people that are very uncomfortable for you personally to be around, even though they don't intend to. They're just trying to be happy too. But their energy and your energy are kind of come together and spark. And I would say, don't add, don't subtract, don't divide. Do nothing with it. Just, if anything, receive the sparks. Just look, whatever sense is picking up on those sparks of that negativity, just receive. And no addition. No. The only, sometimes if somebody's really having difficulty, then I give them I don't know where this came from originally, but it's actually actively do. Thank you very much. I have no complaints whatsoever. You can actually do that. If someone's giving you trouble, you can do that to their face, or you could do it to your memory of it. Think about them and do that, so that you use the intention, and you use you could say your wisdom mind, or that aspect of your mind, or bodhicitta is called, mind of awakening, that wants to actually wants happiness for everyone. It really has everybody's, really loves everyone, but not a love that kind of comes and goes. It's not a love that you can find, identify, and you can quantify somehow. It's just, love doesn't belong to anybody. It's not, you can't own that. The only thing you can do you can't even love anybody. The only thing you can do is just be that. But how that shows up for you, how love shows up for you may not accord with your pride, your self-centeredness. May be difficult.
How do we have a willingness to lose when in the relative situation we may be right?
Yeah, quite often that's a challenging part, because we might think, well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, they're obviously wrong. So don't get rid of anything. Just be with it. Probably in every situation will be different, because some situations you might actually come in and say, no, you can't do that. Can't do that. That's inappropriate to do that, or whatever it is that's happening. But to have the other person in mind when you're doing that, so that you don't. So, you may have to be very aggressive. Compassion or love or caring doesn't show up. As Kate was talking about, Kali teaching how destruction, you can't have creation without destruction. You have to have those. So you have to. If you're here, then all I'm saying is don't fight with anything. Don't try to like a talk I gave a couple of weeks ago. I said, don't improve. Not that you won't notice some improvement. Of course, it's going to happen, but don't do it. Don't sacrifice, you could say, your awareness for the incomprehensible polarity of being a living being for some kind of little goal of getting somewhere. Of improving and getting better and better. It's not that you can't notice improvement, but directly in your case that you're mentioning there, it could show up lots of ways. You might say something, you might say nothing, but you would notice that polarity without correcting anything. You might still correct, but there's no added "I'm right, therefore I can correct." Anytime we're talking to ourselves about what we should do or what we shouldn't do, there isn't anything but what's happening. And that's why the ego form will create a whole world of polarity and relativity and right and wrong and everything because that's where it gets its fuel from. And that fuel will operate as long as the body mind doesn't go back into the elements. When that happens, then depending on what you've done in this life, the consciousness will either continue, or it will find another body to try to find its relative happiness, or maybe something else. Question?
Can that polarity ever be so strong, and in particular within the context of the Sangha, where it's best for me just not to interact with somebody or to... Yeah. Thank you very much. See you later.
You know,
Is that a situational thing?
it's very situational. And if you're training your mind, and there's no guarantee, but if you're training your mind and if you're aware of the energy coming in, you're no longer trying to find right and wrong, or buying into some kind of feeling of being correct, or buying into some kind of identity like you're what is that title that I gave you?
The shoe so
Yeah. What does that mean?
figuring it out.
Yeah. It means head teacher. No, it means head student.
That was an unexpected promotion.
Well, you notice how quick I demoted.
Can I ask about in
Certainly.
that context?
Can I ask?
I'm just thinking about is you put somebody into a position of relative authority. Is it ever appropriate for that person to not be willing to work with somebody?
So, as the karma between individuals, I'm sure you've noticed. You're young, but you're old enough to notice that some things you really don't have. They're choiceless. Actually, everything is choiceless. It just looks like you have some choices, which is okay too. But there's some things that you cannot get in the way of it. You just can't, and this doesn't mean you have to necessarily go along with it. But you should work with the energy as it arises. The energy that as it arises is very important to see and work with. Don't object to anything. Don't agree with anything. As it says on the little pillow in the other room there. I think one time in a talk I said, I think Kevin Townley was listening to me, and I say, you may have to kill somebody. I mean, and that doesn't mean stabbed him with a knife, although he had a pillow made with a bloody knife on it. And you may have to kill somebody, and now it's in the white Tara room. I didn't really mean that. But on the other hand, you may drive out of your driveway getting ready to go to the grocery store and run over someone who stepped out from behind a car. I mean, it could happen. So you may have to kill somebody. You can't get away from causes and conditions. You can't protect yourself. You can be the perfect driver, and all it takes is someone having a heart attack as they're coming down past the road and veer into you. We all know this. I'm not telling you anything new, but you may have to die tomorrow. We don't know the causes and conditions that are set up, that are moving constantly. There's so much movement. There's so much movement and everything. Just to go down and try to inspect something very, very tiny, like the cells in your body. There's science right now that is still looking at it, trying to understand what life actually is. What is this that happens, and who organized all this? That's why the who question doesn't work in that case, because you won't find anybody. Wait, on the other hand, that works pretty well. Find out who this is. If you find somebody, come and talk to me about it. I'd like to meet them. Everyone is presenting their karma to the world all the time and looking for acceptance or looking for rejection. Less is better. Be a minimalist. The only thing that you need to do more of is sit still and. Is that a question? Oh, so I've never had anybody raise their hand that way. Yes.
I was wondering about also in the context of a student-teacher relationship,
Yes.
that the teacher may do something that is incredibly painful or upsetting, and yet
Yeah.
because of the nature of the relationship, we give it the benefit of the doubt perhaps. But somebody that is not our teacher may do something less offensive, and yet we cling to that.
Very interesting. What's your question?
How can we begin to give others the type of benefit of the doubt that we might give a teacher?
Might take some time. You have to do it with a teacher first. Just like you can see how I'm sweet talking Kate to get her to be a student of mine. That doesn't work. I'm not interested in getting more students. If this chemistry works for you, then come this direction. But I'm not interested in magnetizing or seducing anyone into being some kind. I don't need followers. If I want anything, I want Buddhas. I want everybody to awaken to their truth, so they don't need this old man. And they'll see that they never really needed me. Not a cult, as I've said many times. Mainly I'm saying that because there's so many cultish operations where they're right. Well, I don't claim anything like that. Yes.
Seems traditionally there's a pretty relative goal on the path to have some kind of fruition, but as we practice, that seems to be maybe less of the case. Is there a goal that we have?
Save all beings, be with all things, help everyone. Help everyone. And you might have to work with this identity first. If you've got a warfare going under your rib cage that you don't know about, you've been stuffing since you were 3 years old because you were mistreated then, or you were mistreated in the 13th century in a prison somewhere, which is possible. I'm not saying it's true, it's possible. Then that is hidden. It's so painful that you hide out from it. We don't want it. It's painful. So if it starts to surface, if something triggers that, we might either run away or we might accuse the person that has triggered it and think that the aggression we're feeling that looks like it's on them, it's called projection, that we have to go to war with that, when actually it's our aggression. They might be even shocked that you're so upset. So, gee, sorry I offended you. What the hell's his problem? That kind of thing, yes.
Is the goal continuous?
It doesn't go anywhere. So continuous is a relative term. You have discontinuous and continuous, and I would rather say it's just a vow to be with all things. It's ongoing. Once it starts, can't stop it. So if you want to call that continuous, you could. But on the other hand, it isn't anything at all. It doesn't separate itself from anything. If you, in this situation of receiving a vow to be a function as a Buddhist, student of the Buddhist Dharma, that teaching, then sometimes we need more, as I call this, more glue. Maybe we need to make the soul one of these and glue ourselves to this, because it's very easy to go another direction. Just a few random thoughts about, what am I doing this for? This is ridiculous. It doesn't take much of that to just go somewhere else. And what do I say? Is that right or wrong? I don't know. I know what your karma is doing to you. I know my karma is difficult enough. I couldn't do this if I didn't have some fairly difficult karma. Sato?
When the difficulty is coming up from inside rather than coming at us from the outside, is thank you very much, I have no complaints whatsoever appropriate there?
I think it could be. I think it would be up to each person. Might have to do a lot of them. Or you could just do nothing at all, but just watch the difficulty. Just watch it. If you don't add anything to the difficulty, say it's a feeling of depression, which is kind of, we give it a name because we don't know where it's coming from. Say you're there and you wake up in the morning, you're just feeling depressed. No math at all. Just receive the feeling. Give it your attention, and then as you give it your attention, you'll notice that feeling seems to move towards you, or seems to kind of take over your consciousness. Just observe it. And if you don't have a strong awareness practice, it's very difficult to just observe. It's very the thought process is very seductive. It wants to get down and tell you what you're feeling. The thought process, the thinking process, especially the six, it's more subtle with the sixth consciousness because it doesn't show up too much as this, like the seventh does, as me. It's more like, well, we just need to take care of this. You need to, this is because you're not eating this, or you're not eating too much of that, or anything. It can go anywhere. It's because of the way you were treated when you were 3 years old. And it's not that some of those things aren't correct. It's just that they're circular. So they'll go in circles where what is recommended from here, and I mean from here, is to just receive whatever happens. This is how you train yourself to be a bodhisattva, to relate with the world is in terrible suffering everywhere. And in order to help the world, you have to make sure that your own suffering doesn't, that is locked in your sensorium, or whatever you want to call it, this incarnation, doesn't get confused with the suffering that's arising in the world. So you don't project your suffering onto the world and make it not only worse for them, but worse for yourself. So clarify this. It's not that you can't go and, vote. Can't talk to people about their ideas and it's not that you can't hang out and stuff like that. Join a movement or something, you could. But to really find out what this is, rather than naming it depression, don't even name it anything. If you name it depression, then find that little slip where that's written down and that part of your mind where notes are kept. And then just set it aside. Say, well, if I need that, I'll get back to it later. Right now, I just want to see what take the label off the jar. Look in the jar. See what's actually in there. Is it actually acorns? Or is it, what is in that jar? What is that? If you're looking at it, if you want to know if you're looking at it, I can tell you how you will know. You won't know. But if you look at any situation like that where you're not necessarily including analytical or speculative thought process, because it wants conclusions and it will laminate all kinds of names and ideas and use all kinds of science and what is that? Entomology and etymology in bugs and words. Yeah. It'll get those mixed up and then you won't notice it. And then if you do notice it, then you'll say, well, I didn't mean that. It's circles and circles. So, but if you sit and just look at the feeling of not knowing is what ego does not like, that feeling of not knowing. And starts to feel insecure. This is why Pema Chodron on one of her books titled her book, The Wisdom of Insecurity. Wasn't it her that did that? Or was it some other dude or dudette?
Somebody else.
Huh?
Somebody else, I think.
Let me have it.
Well, I don't know. I don't know the book.
You don't?
No.
What are you commenting for? I like that smile.
Yes, you much.
I did ask you a question. Yeah. Okay. I stand corrected.
You're still there. Yes.
So there. Yes, sir.
Where in the 5 skandhas does pride show up?
Everywhere. So that's the breakdown. That's the way we look at the ego, the self-centered mind, and the consciousnesses that are arising in the 5th skandha, all of the 6 sense fields and their objects, including a thought arising in the mind. So you're not going to find a location particularly. It's a combination. It's dependently risen. You got a question?
There are a few questions online.
Okay.
Jeremy, I think from Grand Rapids, says, "Good day, Sokuzan. Can one sit all day and never arrive at Shikantaza?"
Sure. Do it anyway.
He also asks, "Can't we escape all this mind pride talk by achieving Shikantaza?"
No, not about escape. Not about getting away from anything. Everything is dependently arisen. There are not separate things called wisdom and confusion. Those are not separate. If you want to find out about that, then watch what moves. Yeah, you can't. Enlightenment isn't something else. Awakening isn't something else. It's you're looking at it all the time. Further question?
From Shane again in California. You say B or neurosis. What refuses to function out of neurosis?
Just self-centeredness. And there could be pride. Not wanting to be wrong. Wanting something else.
Question from Bosker in Houston.
Oscar in Houston.
He asks, if we don't have pride, would we even practice?
You would, Oscar. You'd keep practicing. And it's not about if we don't have. We all have something like that. I'm not saying get rid of it. I'm saying if you're aware of that, if you're aware of the pride, if you're aware of the self-centeredness, if you're aware of that fluffy area, then you don't have to get rid of that. Make friends with that. Be friends with your negativity. But you can't do that unless you're aware that you're kind of needy in some area where you need to be protected or covered up in some way. Just a way of talking about it. And if I was talking to someone face to face individually, I might talk to them differently than I'm doing this in general to everyone. To some people, I might not even bring that up at all, even though I could see it. Some people are not ready to be picked on the way Kate is. Yes.
It seems like in culture or society, there's a fluffing up of pride. Like you should be you should have pride in your school or your country. Whatever.
Yeah.
How
Notice
is
that.
fluffing up pride in that way harmful?
So it creates a sense of camaraderie and brotherhood or sisterhood, and proud to be an American. And at least I know I'm.
Free.
Yeah, or the halls of Montes and the shores of Tripoli. That's the Marine Corps. Like esprit de corps in the Marine Corps, they just call it the spirit of a unit. Get together and and this is what keeps the wars going is the brotherhood or sisterhood. In that, the people really caring for each other, and everybody's in danger. You got a fire team of 6 men, women, whatever, and they're working with an enemy who's going to kill them. They have these things, thunder sticks, and then you protect your partner, your mate. You protect them. That's what keeps the war going. So the Marine Corps and all the other services know that they've got to have the uniforms. They have to have in order to control people. So there's somebody, you notice that the people at the top never go to war, and they get their children out of going to war usually. They give them a pass, something like that. So it's not about getting rid of that. It's about being aware of it so that kind of thing doesn't eventually rise to the top and control everyone. So everybody is sealed off from it. It'd be like proud of being a Buddhist. Although Trungpa Rinpoche talked about Vajra pride, I mean, but he was more about building a community. And I didn't talk to him about it, but looking back on it, I have a better understanding of what he was up to. He wanted to really sink the roots of the Buddhist teaching in this culture, and he was pretty successful, even though other crap has hit the fan since then. But I think that was probably a strong motivation for him. So he talked about Vajra pride, or the some kind of indestructible affirmation going on there. I don't agree or disagree. He can do whatever he wants. Did whatever he wanted to do.
Kevin Townley has a question. I read that the neurotic side of the Buddha family, Ratna, is pride, and its wisdom is equanimity. Is experiencing pride without meddling equanimity?
Yep. That was easy, Kevin. Why don't you come here and fill in for me? Oh, he's in there. No, he's not. He's over there. The question came from over there. Yes, you could say I don't teach out of the Buddha families, but it's a powerful teaching if you wanted to look into that. The Buddha family, the Ratna family, the Karma family, the Vajra, and what's the other one? Padma. Mm-hmm. Just ways of talking about energy. So, have a final question anywhere? Yes.
Another question from Shane.
Yes.
You say don't function out of your neurosis. How do you be your neurosis and not function out of it?
Same thing. Very good. It's the same thing. Again, we're coming back to a basic teaching of Buddhism, of Hinduism, and of any powerful, transformative spiritual path, wherever it comes from. It's the duality that separates us from everything. There's the two-ness that looks like, or the separation that looks like beings here and a being here, and talking to, if you see what this is, you see that nothing is separate from anything else anywhere. So the very thing that he's addressing, the question again, and maybe I can address it more closely.
You say don't function out of your neurosis. How do you be your neurosis and not function out of it?
So the reason I say don't function out of your neurosis, I know you can't help it. I can't help it. I'm completely full of myself and neurotic. I mean, I could say that, but knowing that helps you, me, anyone, helps you function with the world. You're no longer closing off the energy of the world, negative, positive, and neutral. You're no longer picking and choosing anything. You no longer are confused by the nature of fire, the nature of water, the nature of earth, and the nature of air, or consciousness. You're no longer confused. Have no questions about anything particularly. That doesn't mean you're a know-it-all. It might be more like you're a know-nothing. The polarity that continues to show up is not separate. It's just, it's all over, and it's the yang and yin symbol. It's the drama faces, the sad and the smiling face of drama. Not separate. So when I say don't function out of that, I know you can't help it, but if I say that, then you probably will be more aware of what it is that you're calling, not me, but what you're calling neurosis, or what you're calling separation, or what you're calling your ego or your identity. You'll probably be more closely to it if I'm functioning as a teacher guide.
Kevin Townley has another question.
Yes.
Is this notion of transforming neurosis into wisdom a misunderstanding?
No. It's a way of transforming awareness into wisdom, is a way of talking about it, so that the one who is approaching this teaching as a student will stop looking away from their neurosis. So it's just an ancient technology for working with the nature of the mind. The mind, we want to get better, we want to improve, and we want to change, we want to be something else. But the consciousness that we're looking at Buddha nature. I mean, you're not separate from wisdom, and wisdom is not separate from you. But wisdom is manifesting as a stalk of celery, as a tree, as a gopher, as a redwood, as a human being. And this particular manifestation actually can see really deeply. They aren't as wise as the celery. Not as wise. The celery doesn't interfere. Celery interferes with nobody. Man is interfering with everybody all the time. Wisdom is not a thought. It's not an identity. It's not even consciousness. So what was the question?
Is this notion of transforming neurosis into wisdom a misunderstanding?
And again, it's a device. It's a way of bringing the student person to without abandoning, to look at their neurosis and maybe even seeing how come this is a mess. How can this possibly be wisdom? So it's a way of helping the individual student not abandon the neurosis for some higher state, some God realm of success, and getting away from that terrible situation. So, and then when the student gets into that and starts to look at that, then there's different ways of working. There's the tantric practices, the creation completion practices. We're using visualizations of visualizing chakras and deities in each chakra, and doing the various kinds of mudras and spells or mantras, hundreds of thousands, millions. So go ahead. Or just sit down and watch that. Just sit down and just observe what's moving. You can actually start right exactly here, right there, right here. Hold everything as still as you can and see. Thank you so much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our chant books. I'd like to remind everybody about the donation boxes in the hallway. We also receive your generous gifts online through PayPal, debit, credit cards. Always appreciating your contributions. Thank you.
May the light of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji ho san shi shi fu shi song The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect SokukoJi Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.